Nice. So, I went through all of this. So just real quick, let's just take a look at each of these organisms. This is just the turbo chapter 29. I'm not gonna take a lot of time on any one thing. That's a jawless fish. It's called a lamprey, and it'll suction onto something in the ocean, another fish or a shark or a whale or something, and suck its blood.
They have like teeth?
Yeah, well, they can't close their mouths, but they have a toothed oral disc. And they've managed to survive all this time like that. Now what happened was these jawless fish, that's a jawless fish, and it shows their gill arches here. These gill arches are bones that like help opens and close their gills. Fish have gill slits on their sides. And the way the jawless fish used to do it is they'd swim around with their mouth open, and the water would go in their mouth and come out through their gill arches. And they'd get oxygen from the water, and they'd filter feed. The old jawless fish were all filter feeders. And they had mechanisms for opening and closing their gills, you see, little muscles there that could open and close their gill arches. Well, if you can open and close a gill arch, that's real close to being able to, if the gill arch moves forward, that front gill arch moves forward a bit and becomes much larger, well, now you've got a jaw. And we see that through evolution. We see gill arches getting larger, getting more forward, and when they move up and down now, they're opening and closing the mouth. You put some teeth on that, now you can chew up something large. That was a huge evolutionary advantage for the organisms which could open and close their mouth and chew on something. And that kind of changed the world of the ocean. Now, you didn't help to be bigger. It did help to be bigger, but you could now get eaten even if you were bigger. You could get bit. And that's what came from that. Sharks. And they go around and they eat everything under the ocean, and they've been terrorizing the oceans for about 300 million years. And they were still kings of the oceans before humans showed up, and then we started killing all of them. That's a ray. You ever heard of a ray? It's also a cartilaginous fish. Both the ray and the shark have cartilage skeletons, so they call them cartilaginous fish. The jawless fish also have cartilage skeletons, but they don't call them cartilaginous fish, they call them jawless fish. By the way, if you want to learn a lot more about these organisms, you can take marine biology, and we talk about those. But then the bones evolve, and you have the bony fish. And of note, inside the body of the bony fish is a swim bladder. That's a little air sac that can fill up with air and make the fish float up higher in the water. Cartilaginous fish don't have it. If a shark wants to go up higher in the water, it has to use energy and swim up there. But if a bony fish wants to go higher in the water, it just pulls oxygen into its swim bladder from its gills. It sends air to the swim bladder, and the fish goes up higher in the water. Yes.
So does it pulls oxygen from the water and then combines it to make air inside the swim bladder?
Yeah. I think inside the swim bladder is mostly oxygen. It may have some carbon dioxide in there too. Probably a combination. I don't really know. I'm just guessing. Anyway, the fish uses its blood to send air to the swim bladder, and then it can float. And that's kind of an advantage that bony fish have over cartilaginous fish. There's some other advantages. They have bone instead of cartilage, and bone's kind of tough. But the bony fish just kind of took over and multiplied, and there's thousands of species of them. They have some advantages over the cartilaginous, and so once they evolve, you see bony fish kind of expand through the sea. Yeah?
So does this have anything to do with why fish float when they die?
Yes. I think so.
When they float for like the same reason humans float when they die?
No, I think it has to do with the swim bladder. It's a good question. We need to Google that. I don't want to tell you exactly why, but perhaps the swim bladder fills up and they float.
If you catch like that fish up top from deep water, then the swim bladder will shoot out its mouth.
Yeah, if you
It
pull
can't
it
go
up
back down.
real fast, the swim bladder expands quickly. You a fisherman?
Yeah.
So these fish did really well. A few of them evolved lobed fins. That's muscle and bone inside the fins. And those lobe fins can be used to crawl around on the bottom of the ocean. And maybe if a fish gets washed up and gets caught in a little tidal pool, if it has lobe fins, it can crawl back into the ocean. And what we soon found was you go from one tidal pool maybe to another puddle on land, and you're crawling around from little puddle to puddle on the land, and pretty soon, if you're born able to crawl faster, you do a little bit better, and pretty soon you got fish running around on land. You know what we call fish running around on land? We don't call them fish running around on land. We call them amphibians.
Would they have like lungs too?
Yes, the lung evolved inside these fish also. So the lung is basically, let me go back to this bit. The lung is basically the swim bladder with a connection to the mouth or the nostrils where you can take in air straight into the swim bladder.
How would that evolve though?
Oh, maybe the swim bladder just grows a little bit longer, and maybe with a little connection there. You're just born with a mutation that changes the shape of your swim bladder, and all of a sudden it's connected to your throat. Hey, now you got a lung. And it doesn't kill you, it helps you actually if you happen to be on a little pool on the land.
So how did the lung evolve?
From the swim bladder. The lung is just a swim bladder that has a connection to the throat where you can take oxygen into it.
Why can't they take air in through their gills?
The gill is evolved to work just with water, and it'll dry out really quickly if it's exposed to air. It dries out and becomes crusty, and it can't take in water. It can't take in oxygen. We see as fish evolve into amphibians, we see the heart go from 2 chambers to 3 chambers. Fish have a 2-chambered heart. Amphibians and reptiles have a 3-chambered heart. And birds and mammals have a 4-chambered heart. So we see the chambers get more and more as evolution proceeds. If you have more heart chambers, you can pump blood faster, you can be more active. You can get more oxygenated blood to your cells faster. Birds and mammals really have high metabolisms. They have to breathe a lot. They're really active. A mammal's a lot more active than a reptile. If you get a pet snake, it's just going to sit there most of the time. Snakes don't do much. But a little pet mouse is running around all over the place. They have more heart chambers, can pump blood faster, be more active. There's what the lobe-fin fish looks like. And there's what the amphibian looks like. Look, he looks sad.
He looks so sad.
Aw, what's wrong, ancestral amphibian? You're going to go extinct? That's okay. The modern amphibians will do fine. Just trying to make them feel better. It's not helping. Y'all know what that transitional form is called? Did we learn that? We learned that when we did the evolution chapter. Does anyone remember it?
What?
10 points if you know it off the top of your head.
What is?
No, you can just say it.
What's the question?
The first one to say it. The name of that transitional fossil.
Transitional fossil.
That half part fish, part amphibian. Has a name.
Start with an A.
Has a specific name.
Oh, it starts with an M.
Nope.
Dang
It's called tiktaalik.
Oh.
Tiktaalik. Do you remember that?
I don't remember.
It was was in the evolution chapter. Here's some other forms of amphibians: salamanders, frogs, Sicilians. You ever heard of that?
Is that a vertebrate?
Like people consistent.
Yeah, these are all vertebrates. Yeah, everything in this chapter is a
Sounds
vertebrate.
like a worm.
Yeah, it looks like a worm, but it's not. It's an amphibian. It's just lost its legs. It's basically a salamander that lost its legs through evolution and got longer.
Where do they live?
Underground. See, if you're going to live in burrows and holes, the legs get in the way. You can't get through small holes with legs sticking out. So you do better if you're born with smaller legs. And they eventually disappear. We see that in snakes. We see that in Sicilians. Yeah. So the reptiles came along, and what was it the reptiles could do that amphibians could not? Do you remember?
The egg. Amniotic egg.
Amniotic eggs. So the reptiles evolved amniotic eggs, and then they didn't have to go to water to reproduce. And that made them really successful. Reptiles could live far away from water, on land. A lizard can live out in the desert. That's as far away as you can get from water. It can lay eggs, and there's a little bit of water in the egg, and that'll keep the baby lizard hydrated. Reptiles did real well. But where could reptiles not go? Do you remember? It couldn't go where it's cold because they're cold-blooded. When we use the term cold-blooded, we mean same temperature as their surroundings. Now, fish are cold-blooded, but they're in the water, and the water never gets below 32 degrees. So fish can do just fine. If the water were below 32 degrees, it would be ice. Do you have a question?
Not the ocean.
Are birds warmer than
What's that?
Are birds warmer?
Birds are warm-blooded. Yeah, you're right. The ocean has some salt, and it can get a little below that. But it never gets down to real cold. That's the evolutionary tree of all the reptiles down here. And the mammals come from reptiles too. The mammal is just a branch of a reptile. That's what our mammal ancestor looked like. It was called a pelycosaur. And it evolved to be warm-blooded and evolved fur and was able to give milk. That's a therapsid. That's a mammal ancestor, and that led to all the mammals. You go back about a couple of million generations, and that's what your ancestors look like.
How big was that thing?
That's a good question. I don't know.
How big is the tuatara?
They can get pretty big.
Do those still exist?
Yes.
Where?
They're only found on New Zealand, I think.
It looks like the lizards.
They're lizards, yeah. I guess they're about like that.
It looks like a lizard-sized dog.
Yeah, they have an eye on top of their head. A third eye.
Small-sized lizards.
They don't do that.
Well, lizards That'd be awesome.
So there's the amniotic egg. There's all various reptiles. There's the tuatara and the third eye, not visible.
Isn't that a bearded dragon, maybe?
No, that's a tuatara. Bearded dragon is they're different, but they are also reptiles.
They have not been very
Here's the birds. Birds have all types of adaptations to make them light. They got hollow bones. They don't have any teeth because teeth are heavy. They've lost their teeth. They have a beak instead, and they have a crop and a gizzard. You ever heard of a gizzard?
Mm-hmm.
Crop holds the food and then moves it to the gizzard. The gizzard has little tiny stones in it that grind up the food. And having a gizzard is actually lighter than having a bunch of teeth.
And they gotta like eat sand and stuff to fill it back up.
Yeah, they eat little pebbles to fill up the gizzard.
They like oyster shells.
Is the crop where they like keep food?
Yeah, they swallow the food and hold it there, release it very slowly to the gizzard, and the gizzard grinds it up.
How does it grind it up?
So they can like
It's got little stones in it and little muscles around it. Move, stones around it.
How does something like common beef get to the goose?
They have trouble swallowing big things. Sometimes they got to tear it up with their beaks.
Oh.
I guess the tubes can stretch to hold bigger things.
They could hurt
There
him.
are some birds that swallow fish whole.
They could hurt him if they had like a mouse squirming around in there.
Perhaps. I think they make sure they're dead, I guess. Or maybe there's acids that dissolve them or suffocate the organism or something. That's a good question. So birds have evolved real hollow bones, and the bones are light. And if you ever wonder if a bone belongs to a bird, just throw it in the water. If it floats, it's probably a bird bone. If it sinks, it's probably a mammal or a reptile bone. Bird bones are real light, and they'll float, and it makes the bird real light. What's the disadvantage of being having such light bones?
They can break.
They break easily. Birds can't be damaged very easily. They'll break their bones. But it's hard to catch a bird because it's so light. It can fly, and it's hard to catch something flying. So that is an advantage, and birds have done really well. All types of birds out there. 9,000 species of birds. There's about 4,000 or 5,000 species of mammals. The mammals are actually three groups. The monotremes are the egg-laying mammals. The marsupials are pouched mammals, where the baby develops in a pouch. And the placentals, the baby develops completely inside the mother.
What is monotremes?
Monotremes are egg-laying mammals. There's only a couple types of monotremes left on Earth. There's the duck-billed platypus and the spiny echidna. And they actually lay eggs. Because the mammals came from reptiles, and reptiles lay eggs. So the first mammals lay eggs too. And so they're almost all extinct because the marsupials and placentals came about with new forms of survival that are better than the monotremes have.
So
Instead of laying your eggs out there, why not keep your baby with you in a pouch? Wouldn't that be better than just leaving your eggs out? So they did better. They lived. The monotremes died out.
So they
Why not, hold on, instead of having your eggs in a pouch, why not keep the babies completely inside you? Then nothing can get to the babies in the pouch. They'd have to kill the mother first. And that was even better. So we see the monotremes start to die out when the marsupials come around, and then the marsupials start to die out when the placentals come around. Yeah.
What distinguishes a mammal from a reptile?
Hair, gives milk to their babies.
Okay, so platypi give milk to the baby?
They do. Platypi have little cells on their chest that leak out milk. Yeah.
this is a new question, but like how does like a pouch work? Like is it open? Is like the animal
Yeah, it's
alive
open,
inside?
and the mother gives birth to the baby, and the baby is very immature, and then the mother pushes the baby in the pouch, and the baby develops in the pouch the rest
So
of
it's
the
always
day. The
open?
nipples are right near the pouch, so the baby can.
So the-
put their
So
head up and
it's
suck.
like
It's a
basically
live
like
birth, but it's just contained in the pouch then?
Yes, they give live birth, and then they take that immature organism, and it develops in a pouch until it's able to run
is the
around.
pouch like say I had like a backpack in front of me and I put it in and zipped it up and then that's it pretty and then it
Like that.
the
It's not
animal
connected
comes
into
out
it.
But it's
if they
not
want
like-
food.
There's usually not a zipper.
I'm just like
Yeah.
Like, could you reach
So
in and
it's-
like grab?
Yeah,
like,
you can reach in and grab it.
so you can like open the pouch when they don't have an animal in it when they don't have a baby in it.
Yeah, it's just a
And it's
pouch.
not
So what, is it
connected
just
to anything
hair?
in there.
Like what's
Yeah.
the pouch made out of it?
Well,
like
it's
skin?
it's kind of like the inside of your mouth.
Oh.
Membrane with hair on the outside.
Hmm.
It's like a lip. You put the babies in there. Close the lip up.
And so it just
You got your babies in there.
eats and does everything?
So can the baby
The baby sucks milk from the mother, who has little nipples right next to the pouch.
That's so cool.
Do they lift it?
can the baby like hop out and walk around and then put him back in?
No, they can't. They're too immature to run around. Once they're mature enough to run around, they're
As soon
out.
as they
and
get
they're
out,
running
they're out.
around.
They don't ever get to go back in.
That's right.
Do they lift up their head to get
Yeah, they move their heads around.
that is so strange.
It's awesome.
Oh, that's sweet.
The possums and koalas and all the marsupials, kangaroos, you only find them on Australia. Because Australia was its own island, has been its own island for hundreds of millions of years. When the placentals evolved, they outcompeted all the marsupials, and the marsupials went extinct everywhere. The marsupials did not go extinct in Australia because Australia was disconnected, and placentals never got there.
We have possums over here.
The possum is the only marsupial that survived.
Possums have pouch?
On America or all around?
And anywhere except for Australia. The possum survived, and all the other marsupials.
So they have
went
pouches
extinct.
stuff?
Possums have pouches.
When do the pouches like form?
I'm not sure. I think they're present from birth in the females.
So only females have them?
I think so, yeah.
Wait, do those little charts, do we need to know? Like that?
No, you don't need to know them, but you can see there's lots of different orders of placental mammals. There's whales and hoofed mammals and carnivores and bats that fly and rodents and rabbits.
Human?
Humans are primates, which are the tree climbers. They don't have that order on here, but that is an order. So there's all sorts of different orders of placental mammals, and we won't get into that, but placental mammals have done really well. And like I say, after the meteor hit and killed all the dinosaurs, the placental mammals kind of took over. So that's just kind of an overview of chapter 29. Just wanted you just to kind of see chapter 28. The last 3 or 4 chapters just kind of showing you all the animals and organisms that are out there. The AP test doesn't focus too hard on any of those chapters. That's why I only spent 1 day on each of them. But you might see, they might talk about some kind of research on a reptile, and you need to kind of know what a reptile is to be able to understand those questions. So I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about each one. So we're going to skip chapter 30, which is human evolution, and we do that after the AP exam because it's very interesting, but they don't test on it on the AP exam. Yes?
Will the seniors not be there for that?
The seniors won't be there for that. But guess what? You can watch it online after you graduate. During your graduation party, y'all can watch my lectures online.
I'll do that.
So we're going to go into chapter 31 now. So could you stop that?